So the at-rest cost, so this is, you should know about the calculator. So if you go to the Windows Azure portal and you hit on pricing, it'll bring you to the calculator, and there's a general calculator that will help you determine how much your cloud deployment, all the different services together, will run you on a monthly basis. So websites has a free tier, and you can look at the others, virtual machines and so forth. We're going to focus on storage. And notice there are two different kinds of storage here with different prices. And one of them is geo-redundant storage, and another is locally redundant storage. We'll come back to what these mean in a few other points. And the monthly cost, the at-rest cost, is dependent, not surprisingly, on how much data you have stored. So if you want to store 5.75 terabytes of data, it'll cost you about $475 a month at rest for the geo-redundant version. A similar amount of the locally redundant storage would cost you somewhat less. This isn't very good. This is useful for taking your actual usage and figuring out what the total will be. But there are better ways of figuring out, or just looking at a price list. We'll do that in a second. Then the storage transactions. If you use 20 million storage transactions, that'll cost you $2. So let me go back here. I said there were three kinds. So the first one of those, the geo-redundant storage at rest and the locally redundant storage at rest, those were some prices there. The transactions are the second leg, and the transactions are storage operations. So a storage operation means that every API call, every REST API that I invoke against storage, it counts. And they can add up pretty quickly. That's why it's 20 million of them, I think it was, cost $2. Yeah, so they're very inexpensive, but if they do contribute to the cost. So the way that storage transactions can add up a lot is if you're using a page blob as a disk drive, such as in a virtual machine or in a Windows Azure drive. The Azure team actually they decreased by 90% the cost of a storage transaction when the virtual machine infrastructure as a service capability lit up back in June. As a result of that, the cost of a virtual machine was just too high because these storage transactions added up so fast. So every time your operating system did something, or just running your operating system, it's constantly interacting with its disk, which is a blob. So they said instead of before the price adjustment, you would have got 2 million for $2 or $1 million for $1. Now it's you get 10 times that for your buck. So so that's at rest in transactions. And I also said there was a little more sane way of looking at an individual cost, and that is here. This is a little easier to read on if you're looking at the per byte basis. Locally redundant storage and geo-redundant storage. These are the pricing tiers. So first terabyte is you can all read them. And they're tiered, so the more you store, the lower the cost per gigabyte goes. These are pretty competitive, and if you look at the cost of the Amazon S3 storage, for example, these will look very competitive because they're very similar pricing. So this is one cost. The transaction prices, as I mentioned, you get 100,000 of them for a penny, or 10 million for a buck, and then mentioned there were three legs in the stool. There was the at-rest cost, the transaction cost, and the bandwidth cost. So the bandwidth is not specific to storage. You don't get charged as a storage cost, but anytime your data leaves the data center, there's a cost. You can transmit data into the data center for free, but when your data leaves the data center, you pay a per gigabyte cost. Let me look for egress. I'm sorry, I'm having data transfer. There we go. So egress means it's leaving the data center. Ingress means it's coming in. Ingress is free. Azure dropped the price of that. It used to be the same as egress, but they dropped it to $0 last year, and a couple weeks later, Amazon followed suit. But here are the, again, tiered pricing. These zones have to do with geographical location of the data center. We'll talk a little more about the multiple data centers in a little bit. So first 10 terabytes per month, 12 cents per gig, and then down to nickel per gig as you go up. So US is in this zone, and Asia is in this zone. I think Europe is also in this zone. Promotional charge, promotional offer. So that's pricing. A lot of people are surprised by the multiple dimensions of pricing for use of blob storage. Now, if you want to compare those costs to some other costs, that you might appreciate them even further. So if we looked at the cost of a SQL database, which, back to data management. So a SQL database for 100 megabytes, it's going to cost you $5 a month. And 100 megabytes of Azure Blob storage is going to cost you pennies per month. And it doesn't get any, the math, the fundamental difference in the math doesn't really change as we go forward. So consider in table storage, that's also in your, these are storage costs in the Azure storage account. So table storage is also in there. So some people, some organizations, it makes sense for them to offload some of their data from a relational database into either table storage or blob storage for long-term kind of archival storage. So that's because the economics are so favorable if you have a ton of data in there. Furthermore, the use of this data is the blob storage is accessible by the Hadoop instance running on the Hadoop services running on Azure called HD Insight. So you can, if you're a heavy user of Hadoop services, you definitely want to be aware of these the storage costs and the transaction costs and so forth. All right, enough about that comparison. And then there's one more. I want to also kind of draw a point here, make a particular point. So if you're using cloud services, which have web roles and worker roles, they also come with some onboard storage in the virtual machine. So if we look at that, so a small, medium, or large, actually, no, I want the cloud services, bear with me, cloud services. The cloud services come with extra small to extra large virtual machine sizes, and they come with instant storage. So 20 gigs on the lowest possible end. This is the 2 cents an hour virtual machine, up to the almost $1 an hour virtual machine that comes with 2 terabytes. So just in case you're looking at these instant storage numbers and saying, wow, that's a convenient place to store a lot of my data, be aware that these are not durable drives. This is not the Azure drive. This is not the kind of drive that the infrastructure as a service virtual machines are backed by. This is not blob backed. So if there's any sort of a failure on one of these machines, your data would be lost. Or if there is Patch Tuesday or some scaled down event where you go from 4 instances to 3, whatever data was on that 4th instance, if it was still in local instance storage, would be gone. There are good uses for this data, but long-term persistent storage of your critical business data is not one of those good uses.